This broadcast of In Focus is being made possible through the support of Reed Health. Reed Health, right beside you. And by Cronin Toyota and Cronin Nissan, with over 70 cars inside their massive showroom so you can shop in comfort. Cronin Toyota and Cronin Nissan, 5601 National Road East. Good evening and welcome to this edition of In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WCTV Channel 11. I'm Eric Marsh, Executive Director of Whitewater Community Television. Wow, this is what the studio is like. We have not been in here. I'm still trying to figure out how long it's been since we've actually had a chance to do a live In Focus program. It has been a while. We have taken advantage of what has been, for the most part, nice weather. We've been out in the community having a chance to record a number of events over the last few weeks, bring those to you. We've had conversations with entrepreneurs downtown and in other places, and that's been great. But it's also great to get back into the studio, have a chance for you to help ask questions of our guest. And we have one of those times. Normally, 3-4 times a year, maybe we get a chance to sit down with Mayor Dave Snow, but with this being an election year and Mayor Snow having had a primary challenger, we did not get a State of the City address this year. And we didn't have a chance to talk to him following that. So it's been January since we've had a chance to talk to you. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Eric?
I'm sweating a little bit, and I'm not quite sure why.
It's hot.
It is very, very hot outside, and we're actually going to start with that. Hopefully you have already seen this information. There is an excessive heat warning that it started in effect at 2 o'clock this afternoon. We're doing this on Thursday, obviously, and that goes until 8 p.m. on Saturday. Heat indices around 100 or up to 105. That is going to go. Heat stroke, heat exhaustion, things of that nature are obviously quite possible during this time. So we're going to start this show not so much with a question-answer thing, but giving you a chance to talk to residents and remind them of some cooling stations, how to keep cool, and some other things that the city will have available to them this weekend during this heat. Sure.
Well, first and foremost, take the heat seriously. The heat advisory is serious, and we have some community events going on this weekend, which I know we all want to be a part of, and they're fun. I'll be there myself, but just be careful and be smart about it. Hydrate, take breaks from the heat. There are cooling stations available. I have shared that information on my social media pages. It's also on the City of Richmond social media pages, and we're sharing it from Wayne EMA, who is doing a great job of sharing all that on Facebook. So go find Wayne Emergency Management, and they'll give you all the information you need. So we have cooling stations in Richmond at Firehouse 1 and 5, and they have cooling hours available all the way through Sunday. You can find that information online. There's Morrison Reeves Library. There's the Earlham Library, the IU East Library. Of course, you've got the Glenn Miller Splash Pad, which I know you usually see kids, but it's a great place to go cool off if you need to. There's some nice cool water there. It's free. And so there are places around the city to give you an opportunity to go in and cool down. But even beyond that, just take this time to check on your neighbors, check on your friends, check on your family, particularly those that are elderly, and those outdoor animals. Please make sure they have adequate shelter, water, and food, and if at all possible, just move them to an indoor location, at least through the heat wave. But if you just can't do that, then make sure you're checking on them and making sure they're well taken care of. So if you have any questions, you're always welcome to call my office. You're always welcome to contact Wayne EMA and just utilize the cooling stations, take breaks, be careful, be smart about it. We don't want to see people overheating and getting sick, but it's going to be really, really hot. As you said, with that heat index pushing upwards of 105, 107.
105 degrees at
pretty
least,
hot,
maybe
pretty
more.
Hot, yeah.
Okay.
So be careful out there.
All right. If you want to get involved in this conversation, you can. As I mentioned, this is the first live In Focus we've done for a while, so the numbers will come up on the screen. We are also streaming this live to both Facebook and Twitter, something new since the last time we were in the studio. We have a chance to stream to a couple of places at once, and I think one of the last times we were in here, we were having some issues with being able to stream at all, but We've gone from being able to stream one place to two, and if the lighting seems to be a little bit better in here, which we hope it is, it's because we've made an investment in some new LED lighting. So hopefully we'll bring our electric bills down just a little bit, and also maybe keep it a little bit cooler for our guests, even though it doesn't seem to be working for me.
I do feel a difference in the lights, though. It's pretty nice. There was a lot of heat that came off of those old lights.
There was a lot of heat that came off of those lights, and these are much better, and actually only a third of the lights that we have are actually on in the studio, so I think it'll be much better for us.
That's great.
We'll have some better coverage in our studio overall, and again, looking forward to being able to utilize that. Let's maybe backtrack just a little bit, because it has been a while since we've had a chance to really sit down and talk to you. You did not do a State of the City address, and it was because, and I should probably get this out of the way also, I know there are some people who are going, when are you going to talk to his competitors? This is not an election conversation. This is a conversation that we have had over the last number of years as we've asked Mayor Snow to be part of this show. We will have forums this fall where all three of the mayoral candidates will be able to come in and give their thoughts on a number of different issues, but this is about what's happening in the city right now, so I wanted to do that. But because we were getting to a point in the primary where we really didn't feel that the State of the City was kind of one of those regular mayoral things. You started it, the previous mayor didn't do it, so we asked you to get it in by a certain date or not do it, again, in fairness to your competitor.
Sure.
That's where you kind of take a look back at what the last year has been like and look forward to some of the things that you had planned. We're over halfway through the course of the year. How did 2018 go, basically, for the city? And as we are halfway through 2019, what are a couple of things that you want to highlight?
Oh my goodness, there was a lot. We have covered so much ground from 2018 calendar year into the first half of 19, and with me not knowing the questions that you have coming up, I'm not sure how much of it we're going to cover. But the things that I'm most excited to talk about, and we'll work them all in one way or another, are the advancements we've made in our city government are very important to me. Big investments in departments that serve this community. So I'm hoping we'll get a chance to talk about the big leaps forward in our police department, the investments we've made in our sanitation department, the work that our street department is doing, the big jumps we've made in our parks department. I mean, I can go down the list of all those departments. And you can tell me if you want what, because I don't know what you have. We have an hour and a half together. You always have a robust line of questioning just ready to go. So I don't know where that questioning is leading us, but I want to be able, in the time we're here, to talk about all those investments. There's been a lot of progress just in the city. We've been pushing forward on getting the roads fixed. There's no questioning that. We're in a bit of a reprieve right now. Most of the barrels and the cones are gone, not all of them, but a good portion of them. Those projects have been buttoned up. NDOT was here, a week or a week and a half ago officially open that 27 project. Is more work coming? Yes. Is it very much needed? Yes. Will it be a pain in the neck like the last round? Absolutely. Not going to sugarcoat that. But does it need to get done, and is it worth it? Because on the other side is what we see now, and the answer is a resounding yes to that. When you go down those roads now, you say, oh my goodness, this is great. Now that everything's out of the way, this is awesome. And you've probably seen some of the city paving we're doing right now. South 4th is being milled and paved in the last week. Elks on the east, Elks Road on the east side of town. We have a lot of projects we're going to be doing all summer, milling and paving. So
did that Wernley Road project get pushed up a little bit because of complaints, or it was always scheduled to be done? I think that was a community
It was on track
project.
regardless, and the citizens were getting angry in that area, and rightly so. That road was looking terrible. We had some drainage issues. It was.
I was on that road.
Yeah,
that road was horrible.
Absolutely, I had to traverse that road myself. It was in terrible shape. There were some drainage issues with some tiles and some other utilities that had to get done. There was a lot of coordination going on. So it was never as though we were stalling on our end. There were just a lot of moving pieces that had to all wrap up, and we'd asked that all really get buttoned up and get done so we could get that paving on top of there. And now it's much nicer. So there's a whole lot to talk about. So now that we know those overall topics, I guess we can proceed into some of the questions you have, and that way if we don't cover something, we can come back to it, or if there's something you want to start on.
Okay. Let's start with something that has been a conversation for almost a decade, I guess. That's now what is the undeveloped piece up the street,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
former
absolutely.
Reed property.
So you almost made it through without calling it that. I was going to be so proud of you.
Almost did
You
it.
almost did.
The fencing came down this week. I think yes, the fencing came
exciting?
down
Yeah.
this week, which was very good. That was going to be one of my questions because I know they were waiting for some grass to grow in, supposedly, in order to get that done.
Got some beautiful pictures here. Look at this.
Yeah. So, hey, we prepared for this show.
That is awesome. That is awesome, yeah.
So that's down. Now the question becomes, to a certain extent, two. One, upkeep of that property, because right along that fence line, the weeds were really starting to be very high and unsightly, as you can see there.
That's right.
Who takes care of that? Does that get turned over to something else that the Parks Department now gets to do? Is that going to be something that works in conjunction between the Parks Department and the County Highway Department? What happens to make this at least a somewhat presentable piece of property?
Sure.
Let's start there.
The weed line at the fence was a result of them not being able to mow right up at that fence line. And so with the fence coming down, the company that we've contracted with that's managed us through this project, we have an agreement with them to keep up on that for the rest of the summer. So it's all those weeds are going to come down next. The fence just came down.
Right. It's just been the last 36 hours or so.
Yeah, exactly. And so the next step for them, they're going to come back, knock all those weeds down at the fence line, and then start a regular mowing to get everything on one nice field. And so that's going to look beautiful. And then, of course, we're working through the future land use planning at the same time to figure out our best use for that site as we move forward. And then one of the things that we're working on, so there's a lot of things we can talk about in this vein, and I'll let you kind of guide which one you want to start with, is the community celebration there that I want to have. So
that was something that you had mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that still in the planning process?
It absolutely is, yeah. So, okay, so let's back up. We'll try to hit all these veins. So the fence is down, and the fence had to stay up until the grass was deemed to have taken hold, because that was part of the original contract agreement. And we can clearly see the grass has taken hold. It's growing, it's flourishing, we're good. There were a few drainage issues that were left on the site. They had to see some rain come in and see where there was some pooling and maybe do some grading and kind of fix up some of that. So all that is officially done. The fence is down. So like I said, they'll be back, they'll knock down those weeds, and then they will mow it for the rest of the summer. In the future, you had asked, where does that fall from there?
Right.
We do right-of-way mowing contracts that we work on in the very first part of the year to have those in place by spring. Right-of-way mowing, nuisance mowing, blight mowing. So it will then move into our mowing contracts. But for now, it's going to be taken care of by the companies that oversaw the project. They'll take care of the mowing for the rest of the summer. So there's that. So we'll have a nice mowed piece of land for the rest of this year.
Cool.
Moving into the community celebration, because I think that's the next most immediate step. I think it's essential. Two things we got to work on here. We got to stop putting Reed's name on that site. It's gone. It's gone. It's over. It's gone. And so it's hard to give it that name. What do we call it?
What do you call it? Sure.
I've started calling it the undeveloped land on 27 because I don't know what to call it. And I think last time I was here, I told you that inside City Hall, I was talking with my team about just renaming it. Like, if we're going to have this community celebration, let's rename the site. We talked about Freeman Heights and all these, because Freeman Hill's right below it. But everybody said don't do that because you're saddling the future developer with a name that they might not want to keep.
Sure.
So it kind of, for the purpose of marketing, needs to stay somewhat unnamed, which makes it hard for us.
Let's see. We can call it the Future Sledding Hill.
The future. I thought about that last winter. You're right. So, so it's hard to give it that name, but so that's one thing, is how do we start referring to that site and not putting that on Reed anymore? They sold the property outright. They did all their due diligence. They moved. And then they came back to be a contributor in the project, which they never, ever needed to do. So that was tremendous community partnership on their part. And to continue to saddle them with that is just so, it's so unfair to them. So in moving on, but what we need to do is memorialize that site. That site deserves our moment to memorialize the people that whose lives ended there, the lives that began there, the family members we welcomed in from that place.
Sure.
People spent their whole careers healing others there. People were healed there. How do we take that moment and commemorate that site, memorialize that site, and then celebrate that we're moving on? It's not something we lost. It's down the road, and it's thriving, and it's still healing, and it's still taking care of people, and we're still welcoming new family members.
Correct.
But that patch of grass there, it needs its moment. Maybe a little plaque or something to say this was the former site of, Reed Hospital found it in this year until it moved up north.
Okay.
So I would like to do that in the first part of October.
Okay.
That's kind of when we're looking at that, because the weather should be a lot more cooperative by October. Shouldn't be anywhere near this hot. It'll get dark a little sooner, so if we wanted to have some little fireworks or something, we could do that.
Ooh.
I know. The planning team is right now all screaming at their televisions because they're like, Mayor, we are not far enough along in this process or establishing a budget.
He promised us fireworks.
Well, there you go. So, but I do think we need that moment there. Let's have a moment to memorialize, and then let's also celebrate and move on.
Cool.
So hopefully that'll come in October. They're working on that now.
Okay.
And this is the same team that coordinated the Indiana Conference of Mayors and the 50th anniversary open house, and they did a fantastic job putting all that together. That was a magical evening.
Mayors I had a chance to talk to seemed very pleased about being in this area.
Wasn't that great? Yeah, it was awesome. So we can come back to that, but that is the same team that's planning this now, and I know that they'll do a great job.
Okay.
So moving into the future land use planning, we want to make sure that we're looking at that site appropriately for how it can be utilized in the future, knowing there could be some restrictions in place and how we develop and where we put buildings and how those buildings will all end up being there.
Mm-hmm.
Development you see today is a little different than the way that hospital was laid out. The parking was right there off of 27. The building was kind of recessed.
Correct.
Then there was some parking even farther behind. The parking in the very back was in the floodplain area. And so that often in a heavy rain would get flooded and the cars would all have to move up. If you kind of go down the road and look at it now, you'll notice a lot of the parking lots are behind the buildings. A lot of the office buildings we see are on the road and the parking's behind. So is that the development we want to look for moving forward? Do we want to see development up closer to the road and see the parking behind? Do we want to see it on both sides, a little bit farther back and a little bit by the road, parking in the middle? And what is that best use? Is it commercial? Is it residential? What is it?
Who finally makes that decision, the developer or the developer in conjunction with some serious conversation with the city? Question mark.
Well, I would say the final decision comes on who's the serious developer that comes forward with the plan is going to be where we ultimately end up. But the community should have a lot of input as to what we as a community want to see there, which is why we've made it a part of our Richmond Rising comprehensive plan. So the company that we've contracted with our comprehensive plan, Richmond Rising, our 10-year plan, is also helping us with the future land use planning of that site. So as we go to these public meetings and we go to the county fair and we go to the International Food Festival and all these places, we're bringing with us, how do you want to see that site in the future? What do you want to see there? Tell us about your thoughts and your ideas, and we're gathering all that data from the community so that we can guide that development in the right direction. And there's also, sometimes there's funding that can be linked to comprehensive development planning. So sometimes when you're working on an area of a city, when you're working with the state or other organizations, they'll say, was that area part of your comprehensive development plan? Did you plan for the growth of this site in your 10-year strategic planning? So by adding that site to this plan, it gives us more leverage in the future, because the answer is yes. This was lumped into our 10-year strategic planning for the whole city for the best use of this site. So we're doing all that at one time in conjunction with each other. And I got to mention one more thing. We have applied for, and it's fingers crossed, we have no feedback yet as to how this is going to land, but we've applied for a Governor's Excellence Award, in sustainability for the recycling we did on that project. A lot of people don't realize this, but we recycled over 96% of that entire project, which was a colossal amount of tonnage. We're talking 86,000 tons of material. It's just an insane amount of material. When you think about that entire complex and the square footage, how much of it was underground, and over 96% of it was recycled and did not go to any landfill, is remarkable. So we've applied for that award that we'll find out more about later in the summer. So hopefully by the time we go to our community celebration, that's something we'll be able to add to the celebration. Is not only were we able to take down what had become an environmental hazard, an eyesore, an economic development boat anchor,
And
we did
a huge safety concern.
A gigantic
huge
safety
safety
issue.
concern.
And a disgrace to all the people who spent their careers there. You know what I mean? It just shouldn't have been left to look like that and be in that condition. That was just a shame. But if we can turn that around into a positive narrative and say we were able to recycle over 96% of that project, that's amazing. I mean, we can say that, but I want us to get that recognition in the Governor's Excellence and Sustainability Award. So hopefully we'll have that to share with you in the future. I'm excited about that.
You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We've got 90 minutes, less now obviously, with Mayor Dave Snow. If you've got a question, feel free. Information will come up on the screen as to how you can do it, either through a chat question or through one of the social media sites that you are seeing this streaming on, either Facebook or Twitter. What's the latest update that you can provide on what's happening with the former that big building downtown on the corner with the parking lot?
Concrete building, right?
Yeah.
It's hard not to do that. So there's been a lot of interest on that site. We have attended a few meetings. Everything at this point is still confidential, those who are interested. But if the question were, is there active interest in that site for development, then the answer is absolutely yes. I believe Pal Item even ran an article on that as well not too long ago. So we are seeing active interest. There are a lot of people that are very excited about the progress we're making downtown and where we're headed, and they want to be a part of that. And so we're getting a lot of interest on the radar, and people that are even going so far as to invest in their plans of what they think that could look like if they were going to take the full leap and make the full investment. So those conversations have been very exciting.
So people who aren't necessarily as happy with some of the things that are going downtown, or some people that are running into some water issues. This came up in Monday's council meeting. I noticed it in a couple of different places where I was walking or riding or whatever during some heavy rain. What's happening with that? Were drains taken out when the bike paths were put in, and why are we getting some pretty serious flooding in a couple of those areas?
We're getting that in some of the intersections, and now it was also pointed out in council that there are lots of intersections where we've seen standing water for years
very
and
true.
years.
Very true.
And so it's not like it's a brand new thing, nor is it exclusive to the bike path.
But if you look at that area, and I'll just pick one between South A and Main Street on 10th.
Correct.
There's almost no place for water to run in.
Yeah.
You look at one side of the road, there's no drains there.
And that's when we illustrated in council, the project is not finished. That is still on the project completion list, and that's something that we continue to say has to be resolved before it can be closed. And so they're putting these things in, they're monitoring it as it does rain. Of course we are seeing the flooding. Of course we consider that unacceptable. And so we want to see more of the project, because there's still quite a bit of work to do, particularly on the west side of that. When you go closer to the jail, we want to see more of that work get done, but we're going to make sure they're circling back and buttoning up some of these other issues that we're seeing on the other side. So that will continue to be addressed before the project can be closed.
Is that work in the block where the bank is, where there's some businesses near Elstro? How close is that to being finished, right there in the corner of the former Elder Bierman building where everything is torn up? Is that on time right now?
They were due to be finished on that one in the first week of July, and then just this week submitted a request for extension. So that is coming from NDOT, Milestone, Rundell Ernstberger, and United. They have had some issues with the work that they're trying to accomplish. And again, this is not on the city side. This is on their side, on the construction side, when they have hurdles that are in what they call their critical path of work.
Okay.
Some of those issues, and now I will give them a little bit of credit and say some of the issues they had were the topsoil. They have topsoil for the planter beds. When we had that constant rain that wouldn't stop, the topsoil comes from a field where they literally bring up the topsoil and take it to site. But when it's saturated, they can't do that. And so that was one of the things that held everything up for a couple weeks. It just wouldn't stop raining enough for the topsoil to dry out and aerate enough to deliver it.
It's probably dry now.
I'm sure it's dry now. So there have been some issues on their end between those companies that are trying to get this work done. But this, keeping to the timeline and getting things done is as advantageous to them as it is to all of us.
Sure.
It's a pain in the neck for us, but they've got other projects they got to get to. So they just submitted their request for an extension. That request has to be approved. I believe, I'm going off the top of my head because this just happened this week, I believe they submitted for August 30th was their new completion date that they're going to work from now. So,
okay.
I can't tell you for certain if that has been accepted and approved, because it has to go back through that chain again and be ultimately approved by NDOT, by the Indiana Department of Transportation. I'd have to check and see if they have accepted that, but that's where we are with that at this moment.
And we hear that a couple of businesses, Phillips Drugs is one that comes to mind, is now seeing water in their basement, in their lower level. how fast can that get resolved? We're talking about a business or businesses that are really being inconvenienced.
That's important to me. I actually just last Friday went down and talked to Pete Zaleski myself. I'm very committed to making sure that when this project is finished, he absolutely should not have water in his basement. I mean, it's cut and dry. So now there's so many things happening at once. You've got several utilities working on that corner. You've got landscaping going in. You've got a sidewalk going in. You've got a street being paved. It's hard to point the finger at where the water's coming in. But we just had a meeting yesterday, bringing all the parties in the room and saying, how do we test this? How do we run tests to see exactly what point this water's coming from so that we can stop it? So that's on the top of the project list as well. And so that's something that I continue to make a priority and say, you know, the standing water in the corners has to be fixed, and then no business owner can have water in their basement when this is finished. But these are parts of this process. When you're tilling up all this dirt, and you're bringing all this up, you're going to have issues. But as long as we fix them, then we fix them and we make everything better and move on to the next piece.
We'll go back to one more thing from this past week's council meeting, because one of the things was brought up. The way the downtown area looks, there was a lot of weeds that were growing in. You mentioned in your communications from the mayor that there had been some money passed to the Parks Department. The Parks Department handled that. That's gone by the wayside. The Parks Department was cleaning that up. But I think you mentioned that you were having a meeting with Center City, I think the next day, to get that discussion going. Are we making any progress on somebody being able to do that on a regular basis? Because a lot of money has been put in down there.
Absolutely. The progress, if we talk about the progress that's been made, is just calling our park superintendent and saying, this has to get done. Yes, there's a lot of talks that have to happen about who's going to take care of this down the road, but right now it has to get done. So our parks greenhouse team has been down there. I don't know if you saw it yesterday and today.
Did not.
It's a complete 180 difference than how it looked. So they've been down there taking care of the whole thing. And so you've got those moments where, yes, there's a bureaucratic piece to this, because there used to be money that changed hands. Center City is in a bit of a stage of flux right now as they try to search out their new director and assign that person with directing Center City. And we can wait on all that to settle before we just fix it, or we can just fix it. And so the Parks team went down there and just fixed it. So we'll continue those talks with Center City. We're getting that groundwork kind of back under our feet again. There's been some instability there, and it's been hard to create a good momentum when there's instability. But Center City is working really hard. That board is working really hard to put that framework back in place to bring that stability so that we can have a stronger working relationship. And I appreciate that.
You mentioned, before we do that, you're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. Appreciate you being with us. Hopefully, if you've got a question for the mayor, you can send that in to us. We've got a tweet, Facebook. You can do that, or you can give us a call. 973, I don't remember the number. I'm sorry. They'll put it up on the screen.
Long.
It has been way too long. I used to be able to just roll that off the top of my head, and I thought I knew it. Never mind.
He was about
to
rattle off
the
number to like dominoes.
You mentioned that there's been some progress with the police department. I know the police department has been hiring to get back to full force.
Yes.
I know that the juvenile division has been doing some very nice things. I know that they've got a youth police academy that is going to be going on, that they've been bringing in some youth about. I'm going to let you talk about your police department for a little bit and the things that they've got going on.
I can't say enough great things about Police Chief Jim Branham and his administration, Major Mike Britt and Major John Bales. What a tremendous job they have done with our police department. And it's coming from many different angles. We've put a lot of thoughtful budgeting into our police department. You talked about the police force being back at full force for the first time in many, many, many years.
Yes.
I mean, over 20. And so we have 3 that are in the hiring process now. When those 3 come on board, we are back to 100% full force. I have no doubt in my mind that within 6 months somebody will retire, and we'll we'll fall right back below the line.
And that has been the way that the cycle has gone for a long period of time.
Sure.
Yeah.
But if we can at least.
But you've got more officers on the street now than you have had in a long time also.
Absolutely. It's making a huge difference, and we're going to talk about some of those stats. But even celebrating for a brief time, being back to a full police force is a huge deal.
Yeah.
It took us years to get to this point, and we had to start on that the minute I came into office, and it's taken us past the halfway part of 2019 to get there, but here we are about to celebrate that milestone. So in doing so, we've accomplished so much in our police department. As you said, the juvenile division has been resurrected. That plays a huge role in their ability to interact with the youth of our community. And when we talk about that, it's not only in a positive way. The idea is to develop those relationships on the front end so that when some of these kids maybe get a little older and end up dealing with law enforcement on the wrong side, there's a relationship there. And those police officers that have developed that relationship can kind of help steer them back in the right direction. It's paid off dividends in seeing our neighborhoods come back together. I made the neighborhood mini grants available. The police department has been very dedicated to talking with the neighborhood groups, being present in the neighborhoods. So we're seeing more neighborhoods coming together. If we go straight to our data, we know that in 2018 we took twice the amount, at least twice the amount, in some instances more than 2 times the amount of cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin off the streets, and closed over twice the amount of drug houses. Those are remarkable numbers. And I think if you're kind of watching Pal Item, you're seeing more and more headlines about drug house busted, drug house busted. This is Chief Jim Branham and his administration down there leading with intelligence-led policing and really making a dent in the crime rates. The personal property crime rate is way down right now. And we're seeing these positive results. You're seeing officers on the streets, you're seeing them walk beats more, you're seeing them more involved with community festivals and things like that.
Yes.
Because we've got more officers. And I just can't say enough about our officers as well. These are some of the best women and men. They work so hard, they care so much about this city and the people of this city. We've made investments in their tools and their equipment, their vehicles. That's been huge. You might have seen some of the new squad cars.
Yes.
They've got the new ones have the red on them, which I think look really cool. And a lot of that.
It's the color.
Yeah, it's really. I just think they're awesome. Someone jokingly called them the Captain America police cars. I don't think that's actually such a bad reference. It's because they're red, white, and blue. They got the red on them. I think they're really cool. But that's not just something I can sit here and take credit for. That's the work of council. That's all of us working together. That's the work of our controller and the police department, and that's all of us working as a team. And that teamwork results in so many of our departments being lifted like they are now. The next phase for the police department, the next big discussion is, do we keep them where they're housed right now? They're in a 50-year-old police department that's in the basement of City Hall. It's a space that I think that they've outgrown, to be honest. And they could do more, I think, with a more centralized presence in the city, with a more updated facility. And so those are some of the conversations you're going to hear coming. But the priorities were getting them the tools they need, working on negotiations and salaries and getting those moving. That's something we haven't even talked about yet is, we're seeing salaries move. We're seeing labor unions negotiating bargaining units back at the table again, bargaining and getting contracts and getting raises. And so because of all this, we're seeing these departments grow again, which is really tremendous.
There's a lot of ways to go off of that. So let's
I know. But wait, we got 90 minutes, right?
Let's see where we go first. Okay.
Right.
They're in the basement of the municipal building, and you and I had a short conversation about this the night we were in Elstro Plaza, the anniversary evening. Asked you how things were going in the city building, and what that building is like. It's a 50-year-old building.
Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned is that in how it's built, it's not really modular. You can't just easily move walls. So, and you brought up maybe needing to move the police department. Does the city, does the budget, does the council need to begin the thought process of looking at a new city hall?
Oh, that's a big one. So my response to that is what we have discussed in Finance Committee. So council has subcommittees that they assign. We have a 9-person city council, and then they assign subcommittees to review matters. And council has a 3-person Finance Committee. I meet most often with Finance Committee. And some of the discussions that we've had have been, how do we do a full building assessment of all the buildings that make up Richmond city government? That would include City Hall, but it would also include our Parks Admin Office, our fire stations, and see where the priorities are in those buildings. And I think we have to look at that. it would be hard for me to put City Hall at the very top of the priority list because Firehouse 1 is very old. It's one of the oldest buildings in our city government. I think it's 50-ish, over 50 or 60 years old. And then the street department. The street department at one time was a factory that switched over to making airplane parts during World War II, switched from coffins to, I think it was airplane parts, and is now our street department. It's very old. And so our street department is also stuck. And in today's world, they're putting more and more on trucks to make them more efficient, but we can't fit a bigger truck into the bays at our street department. So if we did a building assessment, that one might shoot to the top, the street department, followed closely by Firehouse 1, which is our firehouse headquarters. And then maybe the airport terminal would come in third. The airport terminal is also getting up there and is in need of some updating. So it's going to be hard, I think, for City Hall itself. I believe City Hall is a beautiful building. I'm a little romantic and nostalgic about the building because I love it.
Not questioning the building,
I know.
but questioning the efficiency of the building. And when we start talking about how much money we as taxpayers are throwing into some of these buildings for heating, cooling.
Sure.
Where's the balance?
And so let's talk about both of those issues. The modular ability of City Hall, like we talked about, is limited. When that building opened 50 years ago, you needed lots of people doing lots of things. People were at typewriters. People were putting things in filing cabinets. People were pulling records out of drawers and out of safes. Sure. Everything's on computers now, and so it takes a lot less people. So you have these big offices with 3 and 4 people in them, which you would then think would make more sense to then create 4 different offices out of that. But the building is not really. That's what we're talking about when we're saying modular. And then the HVAC is very, very much 50 years old. It's old. That gets a lot of complaints from the people that work in the building because we don't have a traditional, or we don't have a modern heating air conditioning system. So once we flip over to AC, we can't turn the heat back on. And once we flip over to heat, we can't turn the AC back on. So that becomes a big issue in the spring and the fall.
Yeah.
In the spring, you get those days where it's 67, then it's 50, and it can get really hot in City Hall. But we tell people once we turn the AC on, there's no more heat. So if we drop back down to 40, it's going to be freezing in here. So we often have to wait until it's pretty hot to turn the AC on. This year, when we turned the AC on, it didn't come on. So we had to get it serviced. So it was pretty late. We had some council members, if you recall, that were kind of complaining because they were like, "Man, it is hot up here, especially up in council chambers."
Imagine what the people that were working there all day were going through.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, those are the issues we face. It is a 50-year-old building, but is it the number one priority of all the buildings that are all aging? Maybe not. We got to do this building assessment and look at that and figure out where to start.
Is that something that is on the priority? Because this is something we've seen the Wayne County government do a few years ago, where they brought in DLZ and went through everything and found they had multi-million-dollar things that needed to be done. We're probably looking at the same thing. How does that fall into the budget of a city that isn't seeing rapid growth in the amount of money that it's bringing in?
Exactly, and that's always a problem. I'm glad you brought that up, and that's the hardest thing to convey to the community when we talk about slicing our pie a different way every year to accomplish the services that we need to accomplish for the community. We have to pick up the trash on time. When it rains, the water has to go down all the drains in the streets and the sidewalks and be collected. When you flush a toilet or the water goes down the drain of your sink, we got to collect that and clean it so it can go back into the river. The parks have to be taken care of. The police department needs equipment. The fire department needs equipment and vehicles. But we don't have a means to increase the size of that pie. You just have to cut that pie into different slices every year and figure out where you can lay the priorities in the budget. And that makes it very difficult when you're talking about a building. How does this come in as leverage towards the services we have to provide? But what I will tell you, what we are doing to work on that for this budget session is I've sat down with Beth Fields, our Director of Infrastructure and Development, and we've put together what the RFP would look like for a company or companies to bid on the building assessment survey so that we can have that and start using it to guide our budget processes in the future.
Since we're dealing with the budget, that is probably about a month or so away. You all will sit down with your department heads, go through everything. Let's start with, you mentioned unions and people at the bargaining table. Because you know, and I know, because we've both seen it multiple times, getting a yes vote on a budget, if that piece isn't finished
Correct.
and part of the final thing, I can probably go with 2 or 3 people that you and I both know are going to be solid no's.
That's right.
How is the bargaining going? Will it be finished by the time the budget is supposed to be approved by council?
Well, it has in the past, I will say that. When I first came in as mayor, that hadn't been accomplished in quite a while. That was something that I inherited, was a 10-year freeze on pay. Nobody had received a raise of any kind in 10 years.
Right.
Bargaining units.
I'm surprised you had employees left.
Me too. There were bargaining units that had not reached agreements with the administration in some time, and some of them were working on just past contracts because no agreement had been made, so it automatically reverts to a past contract. And there was a lot of trust that had to be reestablished and a tremendous amount of work that had to go into that. And we've been able, in the time that I've been mayor, to deliver final negotiations, agreed upon contracts by budget time. We have been able to do that. Will we be able to do that in this budget session? I apologize, I'm not going to comment because, and I'm going to tell you why, we are currently in negotiations with more than one bargaining unit. And for me to comment on if I think that's going to be done would put undue pressure. It would seem as though it was a power move, as though I'm saying it had better be done. I'm not going to do that. The bargaining has to happen at its own pace. My hope is obviously that we reach an agreement before budget time. That's what we strive for.
Okay.
But I'm not going to try to speed up that process or truncate that process. The discussion needs to happen. So we'll hope that it does happen, and we'll continue the bargaining process for as long as we need to until we come to that agreement.
Are there ways to make that process more transparent's not the word, but maybe efficient? Get it to, because there's actually, I think, a rule on the books that it's supposed to be done by now.
Yeah.
There's I think it's an ordinance that it's supposed to be done by now. Obviously, it wasn't done before you came in. It's not getting done exactly now. How do we get to that point where it is done, it's not a question? How much earlier does this process need to start? How much longer will it take to continue to clean that up?
We started early. Both parties have to be ready to come to the table. Both parties have to be ready to sit down with their proposals and be ready to negotiate. And then when proposals are made, you have to give the bargaining unit time to digest the offers that have been made, the counter offers. You have to give the administration time. It's hard to put a clock on that and start ticking it down and say everybody's got to be at the table agreeing to this at the 0 hour. That puts undue pressure on the process that can make it more contentious, and that's not what we need. So what's more important is that we're at the table, we're listening. Now, one of the things that my administration started that wasn't in place before was labor management meetings. We were getting into situations where the negotiations were being bogged down with issues that could be covered in labor management meetings. And because you have small issues that build up that are very important to the workforce that are saying these small issues have not been addressed, we could have covered that in labor management and not brought that to the table in a major contract negotiation. So having labor management meetings have made a huge difference in expediting the process, but it is still a process and it has to take the time it takes. It just does. Yeah.
Okay. As you're looking at this year's budget, what are 2 or 3 of the major priorities that you're trying to get accomplished in this budget? Is it equipment? We've seen, if you go through social media, there's always pictures of broken down trucks from the sanitary district or wherever. Is it getting equipment for some of the departments that haven't been able to get it for a period of time? Is it raises for employees? Is it building? What are some of the priorities that we'll be hearing about from you?
I would say 2 of the big overarching themes you're going to hear in the budget, on top of just increasing the ability for the departments to serve the community. You're going to hear about that. You're going to hear about different ways, like you do every year, about how we're going to do this to make this more efficient or better. Overarching, you're going to hear about that building assessment. That's going to be a big one. And you're going to hear about the salary survey that we completed. Our human resources office and our city controller have put a huge amount of work into a salary survey, starting with cities of population of 50,000 or below, and then moving into cities with a reasonable certified net assessed value, and breaking that down into where our salaries should be. As we've started giving raises each year, one of the questions that's come back is, well, where should we be? Where's the target? So now we're trying to create that target system. So those are 2 of the overarching you're going to hear. Now, you brought up vehicles. We're chipping away at that because we had the park bond that's taking care of some of the park vehicles. We saw that come up in that conversation. Sanitation, you talked about the trash trucks. We should this year in October be receiving all new residential trash trucks, an entirely new fleet, 6 residential trash trucks to take over the entire residential fleet, which is a huge leap forward for our sanitation department. And again, this comes from smart budgeting and using our dollars thoughtfully. This will be a leased fleet so that we will not have the maintenance costs in the long run, and we'll have a better managed fleet because it's leased.
You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're speaking with Mayor Dave Snow. We still have time if you want to get a question in, either through our social media or through email. Feel free to do that. Looking forward to hearing from you. As you look at your workforce, and you mentioned there were a number of people some who are still with the city, who went for 10 years without seeing any extra money.
Right.
You've been able to provide money, but it's not possible for the most part to get those people back to maybe where they would have been, either from a financial standpoint or otherwise. What other types of things should we as residents be looking at our city government to do for those people who provide services to us? And whether we think of them in that way or not, they are providing services to us and helping provide service to us. How do we work to keep them happy, to bring more people in when we need them, to make them feel like actually working for government, being a public servant is actually a good thing?
Well, I would say as citizens, there's a couple things you can do. A simple thanks goes a long way. We have women and men that work so hard and just have hard jobs that they do every day for this city because they love the city, they love the people, they want to see Richmond be amazing. And so they work so hard for that every day. And so just a simple thanks. That's something that I try to do every time I see any of our employees, whether they're police officers, firefighters, if they're part of our solid waste management, parks department. I just say, thanks for the work you do. I appreciate it. Because it really does mean a lot. City government can never be competitive salary-wise with the private sector. Never. So we always rely on trying to find great talent, dedicated people that aren't looking for a paycheck. If somebody says, what I want is to make a lot of money, city government's not the place. In no position, not even running for mayor. You're not there for a paycheck. You're there because you want to serve the community. It's a place of service. And so thanking them is one really important thing. I would say the other thing is, and this might sound weird, but having your own civic pride. You hear me talk again and again about civic pride, taking care of our city, believing in Richmond, cleaning up your property, cleaning up the alleys, cleaning up the sidewalks, because that's discouraging to a lot of our workers. I talk to our women and men that drive our solid waste trucks, and they get so frustrated. Now, the community will often get frustrated with them because we magnify every little mistake. You know, my trash can was missed. How dare you? And I understand that. I get it. We all get frustrated, and it just takes that one little thing in your day to send you over the edge, right? But I talk to them, and they say, you know, we work to clean up these alleys. We go down the alley, we clean everything up, and 3 days later, it's a mess again. You know, there's 4 couches and 2 mattresses and a turned-over rosy roller and trash strewn. Why? We cleaned it up. Why is it a mess again? And that's really frustrating to them because they care. They genuinely care. And so with us having some civic pride and saying, and maybe not saying so much, here, you clean it up, and instead saying, I'm going to take some ownership of this alley. I'm going to take some ownership of this neighborhood. I'm going to try and clean this up. That makes them feel like what they're doing is very valuable because they know that we care. So that's another big thing, civic pride, believe in Richmond. I just can't stress that enough.
Talk about your code enforcement division. Part of the pushback during last year's budgeting cycle was kind of the creation of this new code enforcement division. What has been achieved from that in your mind so far?
Oh, miles and miles. It's been tremendous. So let's back up to the code enforcement department. That was something when you said, what would I have talked about in the state of the city? If you recall in my first 2 state of the city addresses, I said, this is coming. This is on the horizon where we're going to crack down big on this. And I tried to give everybody an opportunity to start taking a little proactive approach to getting things cleaned up and straightened up. So we did allocate a lot of money out of the sanitation budget to create the code enforcement department. Went through an extensive interview process to choose the person that would lead that department. It had to be the right person. For this department to thrive and move the way it needed to, it had to be the right person. I have my leadership development team that I've talked about since day one, that 10-person team that does all department head interviews. And the number one question in those interviews, that was the big one that I had to hear was, tell me how you will walk into this position as a brand new department head for this brand new department and immediately be inundated with negative. Get out there and clean these messes up. And then when you go to do it, the people who are in violation are also going to be mad at you and say, how dare you come here and give me this ticket? So it's going to start off very negative. How do you transition that over a couple of years into a positive, into a community partner, into a role of education and helping people navigate through this so we don't have all these messes? And the person that just excelled at that was Derek Hill. What a great job he did. And so he's taken the helm as our department head of code enforcement, and he's run miles with it. So it took him until about, I would say it was about late April, early May before they were fully staffed up. But now, oh my gosh, they are just running full speed and they're doing a great job. And he's doing exactly what that mission was, where yes, he's out there, yes, he's writing tickets, and yes, he's issuing fines and saying, we're not going to take this anymore. This is a mess, clean it up. But at the same time, one perfect example, I'm not going to give the address, but there was a garage here in town. And I pass by it all the time when I'm driving. And the roof was just caving in on this garage. And this is one of the reasons we but created the code enforcement department was to take care of some of these issues. So just as I said when I talked about creating it, when I said, when I would see these issues, I'd have to call sanitation, have to call legal, remember that whole discussion? Yep. So now I call Derek.
Call one person.
I call Derek and I say, Derek, this garage has been falling apart for 20 years. Time to do something about this. So Derek goes and meets with the property owner. And the property owner says, I've been thinking about fixing it. So Derek says, well, let me give you, I used to be an inspector. Let me give you some advice on how you can fix this. And then we won't tear it down, but let's work on it. So they were given a time frame, some advice. Today, there's a new roof on the garage. Now that is amazing progress in my opinion, because that is addressing the issue without tearing it down, without fines, without fees, but we have a new roof and no more blight looking garage. It's a much nicer looking structure now. And he's doing that all over the city. He could sit down right now with a stack that thick and tell you, this is one we wrote a ticket on, it's been cleaned up. This one, we talked to them, they're in the process of cleaning it up, and it's amazing. So they're doing the job, and it's worth every penny, and I'm thrilled with the progress they're making. And we've got a lot more work to do in that department, so you'll be seeing and hearing that a lot more from code enforcement.
Okay. There is a fly ash problem. There's a hill behind RP&L, as I understand it, and there's conversation going on between RP&L and the sanitary district as to what can happen there. These are two city departments. How does this work together so that both gets what they need and the taxpayers don't get stuck with some outrageous bill?
Well, for me, I'm always going to be protective of our landfill. Our landfill does have a lifespan. We have a very well-managed landfill. It's tremendous. And if we were to go down that kind of road, we would be introducing into our landfill an entirely different product that would require different monitoring. It would come at a cost to our landfill and shorten the lifespan. Now, all that being said, that's my mayoral stance on protecting our landfill. To the best of my knowledge, RP&L right now has an approved plan with IDEM and the EPA to encapsulate and mitigate that on site. And so I don't think that's going to become an issue, but I will always just be protective of our landfill and what that means and trying to extend that lifespan as far as we can. I mean, there will come a day when our landfill is at capacity and our taxpayers and our community will have to have a very big discussion on what next. As of today, that's about 50 years away, roughly, give or take a few. The more that we recycle, the more that we keep things out of the landfill, the more sustainable we are as citizens, and the more that our elected officials protect that landfill, then the longer that lifespan will be.
Right now it's 50 years. We're talking about a 50-year-old city building and what it is that needs to happen to it. That's a conversation that probably needs to begin today, so that 50 years from now, 45 years from now, we're not sitting here going, oh yeah, we knew that was going to happen and didn't do anything about it.
Right.
Who gets
you and
to
I
start?
will be 85 years old.
Yeah,
90,
we'll be sitting there
here.
going, yeah, see, we talked about that. Who gets to start that conversation? Is that a mayor conversation that starts? Is that a sanitation department conversation that starts? Is that a common council conversation that starts? Somebody's got to start that conversation with the community so the decisions are getting made now for the future. Where does that begin and how does that begin?
I would say the best way to start that conversation would be for myself, representative of council, sanitation department, someone that's an expert in environmental sustainability, for all of us to sit down and have a discussion amongst ourselves. How do we want to begin talking about this, introducing this to the community, and creating proactive steps to lengthen the life of that landfill? We continue to make investments in the landfill. We're making investments in this budget session that you'll see go to the landfill. Because again, it's a very well managed, it's considered a state-of-the-art landfill. It's so well maintained and so well managed. And we want to maintain that and make sure that we're continuing the investments to keep it up and keep it moving in the right direction. But I think the conversation would start with us at that table. How do we want to take this out to the community and utilize the knowledge we have in environmental sustainability and the knowledge we have in the landfill lifespan and where the landfill is headed to educate the community in helping us extend that, but also plan for it, knowing that we're going to have to, at some point, hand these plans to the next set of elected officials.
Sure.
I mean, we'll have to. And so how do we kind of lay the groundwork for that and say, here's our tiny chunk, and we'll hand you your tiny chunk, and then you hand it to the next one. And that way, when that final mayor and city council get it so many years from now, they'll kind of have most of the pieces and have it ready.
Am I wrong in my thought process that that's a conversation that needs to start now? Because that 50 years is going to be on us before we know it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get people to, sometimes it's hard to get people to buy into next week, Eric. But if we could get people to think in those terms, it certainly wouldn't hurt to start those conversations now. Because I often find that when I'm talking to citizens and I say those words, our landfill has a lifespan, they kind of, oh, really? A lot of people kind of just don't realize that. And they go, I just thought that was always going to be the landfill, but that won't work. It does have a lifespan, and we have to figure out what's next. And it is very far down the road, but it's a day that will be here.
You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're spending some time with Mayor Dave Snow. Let's talk a little bit about the master planning process.
Okay.
As it has taken place to this point and what still has to happen. I know, again, at the last council meeting, or a couple of council meetings ago, that there was conversation. You brought a couple of people in, Joe Green, Kathy Lucid, who are the local community people. The 504, at least at that time, people had responded to some of the conversations. But you just talked about how difficult it is to educate people. Is it possible that more needs to be done to educate the citizens of Richmond as to what the master planning process is supposed to be right now, how they can get involved in it, and even get more buy-in? 504 was a very good number.
It is actually a very, very good number.
How do we get even higher number than that and more buy-in? Because you're talking about planning what the city will do for the next decade, at least.
Well, and keep in mind, 504 was the digital response to that particular survey.
Right.
And so that's it's a microscopic look at the big picture. So let's back up so we can talk about the whole thing, because I don't know if we've had a chance to sit and unpack this whole thing here in the studio.
No, actually we haven't.
So Dave Snow gets to do his famous unpacking now that he loves to do here in the CTV studios.
Go for it.
So every city approaches a master plan process different. The bureaucratic term is the comprehensive development plan. And so for a citizen, I'm always afraid that it's very confusing because they're hearing so many terms. Comprehensive development plan, master plan, Richmond Rising, 10-year plan. Like, are these all the same thing? Are they all different? They are, in fact, all the same thing. Every city approaches it in a different way. Some cities don't do it at all. Some cities only do it because...
That's got to be a problem.
Well, yeah, but some places don't. They just don't mess with it. Some places only do it because it's tied to, like I said earlier, grant funding and other funding from the state or other organizations. And then when they do it, there's no playbook on how you do a master plan, a comprehensive development plan. It's led by the administration. So you can basically hand it up to the planning team up in the planning department and say, go make me a 10-year plan, and then bring it back when it's done. For me, that doesn't work. I don't like that. Some would say I always choose the harder path, but it's just my personality. For me, this means so much more if it's community-driven. It has to be a community-driven comprehensive plan that the people of this community have put their hands on and put their thoughts into and their opinions. And so when we sat down and made the decision to push for the comp plan or the Richmond Rising plan in 2019, it was everyone looking at me and saying, well, if you want it to be citizen-driven, then how do you want to do that, Mayor? What's your vehicle for that? What's your method for that? How will you pull the team together to put wheels under that engine? It's a great idea. It's a great concept, but how are you going to execute it? So the way that I did that was I chose about 18 community members that I know are very connected to their various demographics and neighborhoods all over the city. And I brought them together as the steering committee, and then chose Kathy Lucid and Joe Green as the co-chairs of that steering committee. I sit on the steering committee, but I don't lead it because it's not a mayor-led conversation. It's a community-led conversation. So the steering committee is guiding the process, and they're guiding the survey questions. And we've done more than just the digital surveys. We've done paper surveys. We've done paper surveys in Spanish to take those out. And then we've taken it a step further because we challenge each other in these meetings and say, that's great. So we put it up, and we had that huge response digitally. But what next? And so somebody says, well, then we need to take paper surveys and take them to the farmer's market. And then somebody says, that's great too, but what comes after that? And one of the most challenging discussions we had in those meetings was when someone said, and this is exactly why I put this group together, they said, that's great that you're at the farmer's market. It's great that you're online. It's great that you have a website. But what about those members of the community that don't self-select for those events and festivals? Not everybody goes to the farmer's market.
Sure.
How do we find those other individuals in the community that need to touch and feel this but aren't at the farmer's market, and they're not at the county fair, and they're not at the International Food Festival? So then we said, well, then we need to find the Gleaners Food Truck. We need to take some paper surveys there. And so we've pushed and pushed and pushed to get these surveys out into people's hands and say, even if you need us to help you through the survey, we'll help you. We'll ask you the questions and help you answer them. And we just want your feedback to tell us about how you live here, how you work here, what your needs are. Because the hope is that when this is all finished, what we deliver back to the community is not a cold bureaucratic document. It's something where people open that and say, that was the input that I gave. And that's really important to me. And that's really important that this neighborhood sees that development. And that's what we're pushing for. And that process is still ongoing. So right now, they just had a meeting, the steering committee actually just met last night, and they're planning more public input meetings as we move forward. And I really encourage everyone to be a part of those, because that's not only your opportunity to give your input on the overall plan and development for the city, but we're looping that undeveloped land on 27 into those conversations. So you can give your input on that too. So this is a really important process. I do want to talk a little bit though about why it's called Richmond Rising. I think, as you know, it goes without saying, civic pride is very important to me. If there's one thing that I want more than anything to accomplish as mayor, is for the people of this community to really believe in Richmond. Isn't that a powerful statement? When I talk to community members and I say, do you want Richmond to succeed and be a great city? They say yes, without question. Nobody ever says no to that.
Sure.
Do you think it will? We get on shakier ground. Do you hope it will? Mostly that's a yes. But then the big hammer, the sledgehammer, is, do you believe? Do you believe Richmond will excel? We'll keep doing better, we'll improve. And there's a disconnect there. And I truly believe that the bridge in that disconnect is civic pride. You gotta believe in Richmond. You gotta believe in what this city is capable of, and everything that we've been through as a city in our history, and how progressive we've been. And you know, there is a statue on East Main at the corner at Glen Miller Park, the Madonna of the Trail. Okay. That statue was erected almost 100 years ago, right? And it's a statue of a woman with a rifle in her right arm, right, to commemorate westward expansion. Now, I will challenge every day, it takes a pretty progressive city to do that 100 years ago. When they wanted to commemorate westward expansion, They didn't erect some statue of a man standing proud. Look what I've done. It's a woman with a rifle. That's a big deal, don't you think? And we are a city that's embraced progressiveness and change. And we have to continue to do that. We need that civic pride. We need to believe in Richmond. We need to believe that we can forge ahead. And I feel like Richmond Rising is the tagline to help us get there. And so I started putting Richmond Rising together, working with that company that I told you about a while back. That was also part of the State of the City
This
address.
is American Structure Point, I think, right?
Well, American Structure Point is helping with the comp plan. We were working with a different company who specializes in marketing and branding. And Richmond Rising was something I'm passionate about, coming from our foundation and rising to our next levels. But a good vehicle to start talking about Richmond Rising, just saying it, is to use it for that 10-year plan, because that's part of Richmond Rising. But I think Richmond Rising lives even beyond that, in just a catchphrase, a slogan, a tagline of civic pride, that I believe Richmond is rising. Do you believe Richmond is rising? I'm going to ask you here on this show. I'm putting you in the hot seat, Eric. We're gonna flip the script.
We're changing roles?
We're going to change roles for 1 second. Do you fully, wholeheartedly believe Richmond is rising?
I do believe Richmond is rising, but I have a chance maybe to see things that some other people don't.
Right.
And that becomes the question. If you want the citizens to buy in as a mayor, as a council, as a government, how do we make some of that real for some of our citizens who day in, day out are still having strong financial problems, who can't find a job that pays them what they need along with child care. They could find the job, but when they tack in child care to it, it doesn't work. How does that happen? Again, I get to see, traveling around with the folks from Whitewater Community Television, I get to see things that people don't see. I was telling you about some of the businesses in the region that we've had a chance to visit, but everybody doesn't get to do that.
Sure.
So how does that happen for our citizens?
No, that's a great question. So we hit that multifold. So let's talk about all the ways that we're hitting it from that angle. And the comprehensive plan, the Richmond Rising Plan, is one of those. Providing your ability to give us your input to say these are my challenges. This is what I need to see changed. That's a big one. And I would say one of the ways we hear about that the most is in transportation.
Yes.
And so once we have that data, how can we invest in our public transit to improve that and knock down some of those barriers? The second way is we applied for the regional stellar designation with the Townsend Townhome and Townsend Scholar House concept. The Townsend Townhome's not off the table. That is something we are still working on right now, working to still build and working to still pursue. And that is an opportunity for people to have livability, childcare, and knock out the transportation aspect and get education, which helps raise people up. The other way is economic development and all the strides we've made in the economic, because if there are more opportunities, job opportunities, then there are more opportunities for everyone. And in 2017 and 2018, we've seen $27 million invested in Richmond exclusively. That doesn't include the Wayne County numbers. And so in continuing to invest smart in our economic development, we're seeing dividends, returns on that. And then one of the last ways that's important for me that I talked about in my last campaign was the Human Rights Commission. Because if we don't have a place for that advocacy, then how do those people know that they have a place to air their grievances if they're feeling marginalized in the city? And so that's another important piece of this as well. And has that been a Herculean challenge? Absolutely. I don't back down from that for a minute. I came into tremendous challenges that had to be overcome in this office. And that is still one of them that must be checked off. But am I working on it? Absolutely. I've got a stack on my desk right now as I've been working with some community members on what this could look like moving forward. So comp plan, economic development, quality of life is another really big one.
Yes.
People have to want to choose to live here. The code enforcement department is a big one. Making sure that our code enforcement is out there. If you're living in a property and the porch is falling in, somebody needs to be held accountable for that. And we've already talked about adding the landlord, the inspection piece in that, and the residential inspection into our code enforcement department. So that's something we're still in conversation about. So those pieces are working, you know.
How long will those conversations take to really show some fruition? Because again, we're talking about, do they believe? Hard to believe when you're living in a place that doesn't have a roof, has holes in the floor. You're blowing fuses every other day, and the landlord's looking at you like, hey, my problem.
Yeah.
And that's not all the landlords in town,
It is not.
obviously.
It is not,
So
no.
so the problem is separating those good landlords
Exactly.
from those who are marginal. But
And that's
been a
yes.
problem for residents for a long period of time.
Absolutely.
Will always be for some, because you're never going to clean up everything.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you move that needle for more people?
And that's the complication we've been having, is drafting legislation that we can take to council that takes an approach that's not overburdening on everyone. But you can't write legislation that targets. You can't do it that way. It's always for everyone. So how do we do it in a way that we can attack the issues that we're seeing, but not overburden people? We have very wonderful, responsible landlords in this community.
Sure.
But we have some that are on the opposite side of the spectrum. And we've taken those small steps. It's not as though we've done nothing. We've taken those small steps, and there's some pressure being felt now. But we have to keep turning that wrench and tightening down on that so that we're making progress.
You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're down to our last probably 15
Are we
minutes or
already?
so.
It's crazy how fast this goes.
I was close, 18 minutes.
18 minutes,
Yep.
okay.
They told me in my ear, we still have time if you have a question. And they put a number up on the screen for me. Thank you. 973-8587. 973-8587 if you want to call in a question, or if you want to send it through on Facebook or Twitter. With 18 minutes left to go, there may be some things that you wanted to hit while you were here that I haven't steered you toward. I'm going to give you a minute or two and see if there's one or two things that you want
Sure.
the residents to know.
Yeah, there's just been so much going on. You've done a great job of hitting most of those high points, but our Parks Department is doing such a great job. I think all the work that council put into that bond issuance, I know it was a tough discussion, but it was an important discussion, and our Parks Department continues to make great strides and make great improvements, and so I just really appreciate the work Denise and her crew are doing every day. Mm-hmm. I did get to mention the trash trucks. I'm really excited about those. Those are a big deal. Cool. Trying to think internally inside City Hall. We have our new software that's in motion now. We had a lot of discussions previously about purchase of new core software. Mm-hmm. That's in motion and now starting to expand a little bit into places. And so that's also really, really exciting. We have that extra person in our legal department, so we've opened up that bottleneck that was in legal. Things are moving faster through our legal department now. Our fire department, we've seen several apparatus purchases. Now we have the new training center that's going in. We saw the training center dedication. Yep. Our leadership in our fire department, Chief Purcell, just doing another fantastic job over there and leading that department, and I thank them for all the work they do. There's so much for me. It's every day. It's keeping all the plates spinning. But it's been amazing. 3.5 years has gone so fast. It's amazing how fast it's gone. And to think that we're in another election year is just, it's almost surreal sometimes. I know, it's gone so fast. But I can say unequivocally, I'm thrilled with what we've been able to get done. You know, the election is the election. It's going to be what it's going to be.
Sure.
And I'm happy with, I've lived in the city my entire life, as have you. Or I think most of, right?
No.
Are you a lifer here with me?
I'm not a lifer here.
Okay.
It feels like it sometimes. I'm 31 years here.
31, okay. I feel like in the last few years, and I want you to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like in the last few years, we've pushed more and done more than's happened in maybe the last 10. Have you seen this much just happening and going and moving in the last?
The financial constraints of the recession created for city government, county government, state government, federal government to a certain extent, some challenges that now are being overcome. But the question is, how fast can you push? How fast can you move? What can you make happen in 4 years, 8 years, 12 years that couldn't happen in the previous 8, 10 because of those financial constraints? Sure. And you're trying to fill a hole that was already there. And I mentioned it. And obviously what some of our residents are feeling was magnified for them because services had to be cut and things of that nature, and decisions have to be made going forward, so that maybe we never have to lose our juvenile department again, because how many kids did we lose in that time frame that didn't have that interaction with that police officer that might have put them on a different path? Sure. How do you think about in your budgeting sustaining some of
Oh,
those
that's always
things.
it's always at the top, yeah. Because of course we have floated ideas that we say we could do this, but maybe only for a year or two. We have to put things in place in a way that is sustainable if they're going to continue, and so that's always at the top of our list. But having pushed things as much as we have and tried to get so much done in such a short amount of time, I'm very happy with that. I'm happy with the work that's gotten done, and I'm thrilled with the team that's chosen to surround me and do the hard work that they do every single day, and all the women and men that work in city government that work so hard every day and choose to get up every day and go to work for this city and work hard. So it's been great. It's been a great 3.5 years. Is there some stress there? Absolutely. That's what you sign up for when you take this job. But it's so rewarding to see the work being done and to see the things we've been able to accomplish. It outweighs the stress in a heartbeat. Just makes it all go away.
Before we get out of here, a couple of things I have to hit, otherwise somebody's going to be throwing stuff at their television set.
Oh, this ought to be good.
The Stellar Facade project is it's continuing, but it does seem to be moving at a slow pace. It was going, it got a hiccup, you've changed contractors. The first building has yet to get completely done, although it's close and it's starting to look good. What's the progress? What's the next step? What's the next building? And is that something that by this time next year, there were only, I think, supposed to be 4 buildings that were supposed to be done. Will we see those 4 done in the next year based on how things are working?
Yeah, they have to get done. They are on a deadline, and they're currently operating on an extension from the previous deadline. So they have to get done, and we have full faith in the contractor that's working on them now to get them done. Have we hit hiccups along the way? Yes. It's always part of the process. Was that frustrating? Absolutely. And did we have to take avenues and make decisions that are not pleasant and that we would have never had to want to face in this process? Yes. But we've made those decisions and we've taken those tangents and are just working to get it done. And so I just talked to Rachel Hughes of the Tin Lizzy. I saw you showed a picture of the Tin Lizzy there.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm thrilled with the contractor that's here doing this work. I'm thrilled. So they're a lot happier. And I'm happy that they're happy. But we have to stay on top of this nearly daily and say, that's great. And we've got happier business owners now, but these all have to get done. So that's very important to us, very important to the state. Who gave us this stellar designation where this facade program comes from. And so they have to get done in the timeline allotted.
And what is the timeline allotted at this point?
It's close to the end of the year, so but we want to make sure it's done sooner than that so that we're not scooting right up against the deadline. So we pressure that nearly daily to stay on that timeline.
We got a question actually through email earlier this week. And I'm not sure whether it's going to come up on the screen or not, but the question was about, okay, it is. Who's responsible for upkeep and updating in the council chambers? And we talked about updating some buildings. It looks dark and uninviting, and the sound in the room and on the television needs work. Whose responsibility does that fall under? And I know that at one point, last year, I think the council passed an ordinance so that they could take donations.
Yes, they did. And received a very generous donation for those new window blinds that are up there, which we really appreciate. So the question there on the monitor is who's responsible? And that's
yeah, right. So, saying people blame us. Get some new cameras.
They're blaming you.
Us.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So my hesitation there. I'm gonna explain why you see me hesitate. The council president will typically present in the budget process for what council's budget expectations are for the coming year. And then that comes out of our general dollars, our general fund. And so could the council president come in and request a $100,000 upgrade to council chambers? Yes. However, it has to come from somewhere. There's not an allocated pot of money off to the side to just put into that and not take it. So all of our departments, it's all a levy system. When you pull money from one thing and lower that money, it's usually for it to go up somewhere else. And that's kind of how, so if we did that, and as public servants, it's difficult for elected officials to say, take money from the other services and departments to make our chambers look nicer. But it's complicated because yes, as a viewer, it is dark and the sound is not great, which is one of the reasons they opened it up to donations. It would be helpful if community members would say, I watch these meetings, I appreciate them, I want to donate to help these chambers improve. But what we may have to do is earmark dollars year for year and kind of grow a pot that we can update those council chambers. I mean, they do need an update. The lighting needs updated.
Yeah.
There's wallpaper back there that's in big need of an update. Maybe some of the upholstery. There's a lot we could do.
Looks yellow.
It does.
The room
And the audio
definitely-
equipment. We've wrestled. I want to say to that viewer, we have wrestled again and again and again with my microphone, because coming from my background, I was practically screaming into that thing. And Eric, I would go to the council meeting and the microphone would be out here, and I would sit down and scoot it up, and Eric would quietly come up and say, "Take that thing away from your face," because you keep screaming in it, and the TV like vibrates at home.
And you're not screaming in it, but yeah, but
well, I just talk
all
big.
of the mics and
you
all
know,
of the
I
rooms.
spent years
and,
just talking big, and so I lean up and with my communications from the mayor and rattle everyone's television. So we've just wrestled with that, and then I have to scoot it over if AJ has something to say, and we do need an updated system that really should include. It's not just cumbersome to the viewers at home. Council struggles every time we have a presentation. We have that one TV monitor that's on the side.
Correct.
And to try and make it so that the guests in the chambers can see it, and so the council members can see it. It's up against a wall. No one can see it.
Right now, nobody in the room
Yeah.
outside of the council members
Yeah.
can see it, and I'm not sure Doug Goss on the
They
end can see
can't,
it
yeah.
because of the size of that
So
screen.
they really need monitors at their chairs and better microphones, and just we need to go through some big improvements in council chambers. But it just goes back to a lot of things that sat for a long time without being updated, and us trying to make those thoughtful budgeting decisions to find out how to update them. But does that come up in our budget meetings? Yes. Finding the money to do it's going to be a different story, but we'll keep working on it.
Okay. Before we get out of here, we're going to end this somewhat the same way we started. Just in case somebody came in halfway through this program, we are under an excessive heat warning
Yes.
for this weekend. So I'm going to give you a minute to, because I haven't had a chance to look at your social media post, and I haven't had a chance to look at the EMA site to find out where some of those cooling stations are. And we really want people to be safe this
Yes,
weekend. It
yes.
hasn't been this warm in a while.
I would say please be safe, and please expect this to happen more than once this summer. We're seeing overall temperatures just rise, and so we could see other heat advisories throughout the summer season. Take the heat advisory very seriously. It can quickly bring on heat exhaustion, heat stroke. Wayne EMA is doing a great job on their Facebook page. That's Wayne Emergency Management, of sharing the information. So our city Facebook page has the info, and I've shared it on my social media sites, so it should be easy to find. We have cooling stations available in the city. There are some around in the county as well, and so I know that WCTV has more than a city reach, and so if you're out in the county watching this, still visit Wayne EMA, because they have cooling sites from around the county, Hankerstown and Cambridge City and Centerville. In Richmond, we have fire stations 1 and 5. We have the IU East Library, the Earlham Library, Morrison Reeves Library. We have we keep referring to the Glenn Miller Splash Pad, because it's a free place to kind of cool off in some water. Utilize those cooling zones. Check on your family, your friends, your neighbors, especially the elderly. Those outdoor animals, please make sure they have adequate shelter, water, and food. Clean water, preferably, and fresh food, because in this heat, both of those can go south quick. And if
Water heats up really fast sitting in a bowl.
And you know, if at all possible, just bring them to an indoor location. Make an exception if you can. I know not everyone can. If you really can't bring them into an indoor location, then just make sure you're checking on them regularly and making sure they're taken care of. So take care of yourselves, take care of your family, friends, and neighbors, take care of your animals, and just be safe in the heat. Take breaks, hydrate, don't overdo it. It can catch up with you pretty quick.
I'm going to sleep all weekend.
Are you? See,
No.
I'm going to the IU East Run with the Wolves. I'm going to go run in this.
Are you going to go run in this?
Yes, I am. I'm not backing down. I'm going to go out and run in it Saturday morning. I'm excited.
Okay, there you go. Mayor Dave Snow. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for the time. I really do appreciate it. It was nice to have this before we get into all the debates and the forums, and it's not an ability to talk at length like this, and I really appreciate this.
Glad to have you here.
Thank
Glad
you.
you're able
Glad to
do
be
it.
here.
And for those, again, we started the show by kind of explaining this is not a election cycle conversation. This is just a conversation with the mayor, and we have been doing this 3-4 times a year since Mayor Snow became mayor. This is the way he wants to help communicate with the community, so we've done that. When we get into that election cycle, hopefully after Labor Day, we will have the challengers running for mayor. All three candidates running for the office of mayor in. There are multiple candidates running for various council seats also, council at large. We will have a forum for the folks running for council at large. There are people running in District 2 and District 5, I think, is the other one where there is a contested race, as well as for city clerk. So we will invite all of those folks in, and we'll have a chance to ask all of them questions during that time. Mayor Snow mentioned the Run for the Wolves. That's just one of the things that is happening this weekend. If you are over in Indiana, well, let's start with that then. Registration begins at 7 a.m. before it gets too overly hot. The IU East Run with the Wolves is going on. You can still register day of race, I believe, so definitely go in and check that out, iue.edu/5K if you want to register online.
Up until 7:45.
He's got it.
It'll
up until
cut off at
7:45. Okay. Some of the other things that are taking place, if you want to go watch some theater, Underneath the Tent, Indiana's historic tent theater, Magical Nights Under the Tent in downtown Hagerstown. The Nettle Creek Players are going on. They've got Rumpelstiltskin, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, Gershwin and Friends. All of that is going on over the next couple of weekends. NettleCreekPlayers.com is where you want to go for that. You want to get out and do some yard selling this weekend, Greens Fork is having yard sales all throughout the community. It's kind of a community-wide thing that's happening from 8 until 5 on Saturday, so go and check that out. If you want to watch some baseball, you're heading into what will be the final weekend or the final games for the Richmond Jazz, 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. Check those games out, facebook.com, Jazz Baseball, or you can give them a call at 977-1275. Keep the Whitewater clean. Couple of cleanups, actually. Springwood Lake from 1 to 3, meet at the park entrance, and the Reservoir North End on the 25th, again from 1 to 3. You can reach out to the Richmond Parks Department if you would like some information on that. They're handling that. The Parks Department is also handling Little JUCO. Just Us Kids Outdoors, 3 to 5. Must be potty trained. Register online, richmondindiana.gov. Events, Little JUCO. That website actually has started to really take shape, getting a lot more information from that website. JUCO Rocks is also going to be going on. This is for grades 1 through 9 as of this fall. Can you believe school is starting in just a few weeks? Couple of weeks, really. So check that out again for more information on the Richmond Parks Department. Wilderness Survival Summer Adventure Program, the 22nd through the 26th. That's for 7th through 12th graders, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. CopeEnvironmental.org if you want some information on that. Parks and Recreation Department present Mother-Son Date Night. That's happening on Tuesday, 6 to 8 at the former Glenn Miller Golf Club. Attire, come dressed as your favorite movie character. That ought to be fun. Do you have a favorite movie character?
Oh, man, a favorite movie character. Oh, that's, man, on the spot. Maybe Marty McFly, but that's so cliche. It's so cliche, but I can't help it.
Chanticleer String Quartet having a couple of performances on the 24th. 10 a.m. they'll be at the Boys and Girls Club, and then at 1:30 they will be at the Richmond State Hospital. The Lincoln Marching Band is having a show on Wednesday the 24th at 2 p.m. at the Cambridge City Public Library. Go and enjoy that. Scat Venture Hunt is taking place the 29th through August 2nd. Figure CopeEnvironmental.org for that, and I've got about 15 seconds left to go, but next week is going to be an e-waste recycling day. They will take a lot of things. They don't take old TVs, old CRTs, so definitely check that out. That happens here at IU East. Next week, Laura Lee Heights is going to be the host for In Focus, and she will be hosting a series of them. I appreciate her helping us out. Thanks for watching this week's In Focus. Be safe this weekend. This broadcast of In Focus is being made possible through the support of Reed Health. Reed Health, right beside you. And by
Cronin Toyota and Cronin Nissan, with over 70 cars inside their massive showroom so you can shop in comfort. Cronin Toyota and Cronin Nissan, 5601 National Road East.